Okay, so let's take a look at an actual Lewis structure for two molecules, two pretty simple molecules. Let's take a look at carbon. As we said, carbon goes in the center. I symmetrically arrange the other atoms around it. Okay, and I'm going to put a bond where there's one electron from carbon and one from each hydrogen, and that's what my Lewis structure looks like for carbon tetrahydride. For water, I'm going to put the oxygen in the center and arrange the hydrogens around it. And I'm going to put a bond. And I also have, as it turns out, electrons that are not bonded on the oxygen. So the bonding pairs are represented by these lines, and the lone pairs are those represented on the central atom. When we talk about lone pairs, we're talking about the central atom that are not part of a bond. Okay, so we have bonding pairs and lone pairs. Just a little terminology. Alright, so we're going to actually make some Lewis structures, and there's always two goals. One is we need to use exactly the number of valence electrons that are available from the atoms, and the only reason atoms are going to bond is to get a full valence shell. So we need to make sure that every atom in the compound has a full valence shell when we're done. Okay. So if you look in your packet, take it through these steps, and I'm just going to go through them one at a time with you. So the first thing we want to do from the formula is determine the type and number of atoms in the bond. Pretty easy to do. Carbon, there's one carbon, there are 3 hydrogens, and there is 1 iodide. Alright, then we want to determine the number of valence electrons, total number of valence electrons. So carbon there's 1 atom, each of them has 4 valence electrons, that's 4 electrons. There are 3 hydrogens, each has 1 valence electrons, that's 3. Iodide, there's just 1 of them, each of them have 7 valence electrons, that's 7. I add them all up and I get 14 valence electrons. Okay. Then I want to develop a skeleton structure. So if there is a carbon, it always goes in the center. And I'm going to surround it by these other atoms that are in it. There are 3 hydrogens and 1 iodide. Doesn't matter which side I put the iodide on, but I want carbon in the center. Hydrogen is never in the center, because if I let's say I put hydrogen in the center like this, what would happen is hydrogen would have 1, 2, 3, 4 electrons, and it cannot have 4 electrons, it can only have 2, so that would never be possible. Hydrogen is never central, always on the outside. Okay, so this is my skeleton structure for carbon with 3 hydrogens and 1 iodine. Alright, so once we have them arranged, we just actually did this step already. We have the skeleton structure, and this would be my iodine. Let's do that. Erase. This is my iodine, and I'm going to put the lines, and the lines represent electron pairs. Okay, 2 electrons. Alright, we're going to add unshared pairs of electrons to all atoms to have a full valence shell. So I've got my C, okay, so I want all atoms to have a full valence shell, so which means 8 for all atoms except hydrogen needs 2. So hydrogen has 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. Now let's take a look at carbon. Let's change the color here to make it blue. Okay. So carbon has, if you look at what's around it, 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, and 2 here for 8. Carbon is happy. Okay, let's take a look at the iodine. The iodine has just 2 here, so I need to add 2 more, 2 more, and 2 more. So now it has 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, so I've met the second rule, which is each atom, this is what it looks like now, each atom has a full valence shell. Hydrogen has its 2. I add my lone pair to make sure iodine's happy. So I've added a valence electrons, lone pairs where they're needed. Now what I want to do is count the electrons in the structure to be sure that the total number of valence electrons used is the number available. So if you remember, we had 14 electrons, so I want to count. I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Very nice. Voila. I've used the right number of electrons, so I've got the right Lewis structure. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is practice on page 4. Do all of those Lewis structures. And then tomorrow we'll take a look at multiple bonds.